Well, I'm really very, very pleased to welcome you all to this podcast. I'm Dr. Jed Diamond, for those that don't know me. And this is a particularly valuable, important, and unique interview that I'm doing with Dr. Darlene Walley. Did I pronounce that right?
That's perfect, Jed.
Great. And we're going to get into a very exciting technology and discovery and work, science in progress about a male contraceptive. Going to talk about Plan A and the company that you're involved with, Next Life Sciences. But I'd like you to maybe to give us a little background about I've read about your background. You have a very varied, interesting background in a number of fields and a number of kind of business enterprises. So start with just a bit about you, your background, and then we'll get into a little more about Plan A, the company, and what you're doing right now and looking into the future.
Yeah, thank you, Jed. My background, I started as a scientist, a PhD scientist, and had a keen research interest and went to work for very large companies, global companies, and developed an ability to take things from concept to the marketplace over and over. So then I saw in the startup world that that was a key missing element for founders. Founders have a great vision, usually great, patents, et cetera, but they really don't know how to take their idea to the marketplace. So that's where I started with startup companies, filling a need that I felt existed. So I did that many times over, have had great exits to pharmaceutical companies, consumer product companies. I've run a clinical research company. I've run a drug development company. I did a women's health company right before this one. And then I met the founder of this company and I had to jump on board, full throttle. We're focused on reproductive health, which is an area that's been neglected, surprisingly, because it affects each and every one of us. And less than 1% of investment dollars are going there. So what that's created are huge needs. And as you said, Plan A is one of those products in our portfolio to meet a big unmet need of unplanned pregnancies. And I should just mention, our founder grew up in the foster care system, so he witnessed firsthand the devastation of unplanned pregnancy. So that was his motivation and passion to find an opportunity like Plan A to really address a very important need in society.
Well, that's exciting. I think anybody, male, female, whether you're in the scientific community, I've been in the gender medicine and men's health field for more than 50 years now. And I think everybody is aware and concerned about population. We're aware and concerned about family planning. I know in my personal life, I when I got married, my wife and I planned to have one child and then adopt a child because there were a lot of children already in the world. And then at some point, I started looking at, should I get a vasectomy? Should she? And as you well know, the choices for uh, planning have generally focused on what women are going to do because it's women that get pregnant. And yet, men who want to be partners and want to participate have often had very limited choices. So maybe talk a bit about
Yeah.
the background of what led up to
Yeah.
this technology and a little bit about then what it actually is and what it does.
Yeah, no, great. No, you said so many things that resonate with me and the company. This is about family planning, and the options are not terrific. For men, for example, you have condoms, high failure rate. We know they're not even used all the time, so the failure rate's actually much higher than we think. Vasectomy, as you said, is rather permanent. A third of the men who make an appointment for vasectomy surprisingly don't show up because that's a very large decision that may not be reversible. 50% of vasectomies can be reversed. It's a 3-hour microsurgery procedure. $10,000 out of pocket potentially. So those are, the options that men have. And as you said, the burden's really been on women, but now we're recognizing that women can't really tolerate hormonal birth control. It's over 20%. I think that number is underreported of women, really just can't tolerate the mental and physical effects of those hormones. There are other products like IUDs that are painful, both on insertion, in use, etc. So I think the world is really ready for another option. There was a survey the Gates Foundation did, and 80% of men, over 80% of men, really want something else. Condoms and vasectomies just aren't cutting it for them. They're really looking for another solution. And as you said, they really want to participate in family planning. They're seeing what's happening to their partner, the change mentally, physically, and they really, they're just outreaching to say, I want to help. I want to do something. I know my partner can't, carry the burden any longer. So it's really, it's touching when I see young men. I talk to men of all different ages about this product. The really great thing about Plan A that I've never seen in my career, Jed, is the medical community. I've worked on a lot of medical innovations, and doctors are very skeptical, as they should be. They're very cautious. They're very slow to adopt new things. Plan A is totally different. Doctors are pulling this out of our hands. They get it. They want to do it. They can't wait for it to be on the market because they see it as such a great opportunity for contraception.
Well, say exactly what Plan A is, and then I want to kind of drill. I want to say drill down, but all these terms. I know I get the willies whenever we talk about drilling or cutting or any of that. But say what Plan is, what it does, and then want to talk a bit more about why it's taken so long to even get to the point that your company is now.
Yeah, no, I'd love to talk to you about what Plan A is. The first thing from a regulatory point of view, and that's something that not everyone's familiar with, but I think we all understand drug trials. We're not a drug, we're a medical device. So a medical device has a shorter approval pathway because it really doesn't interact with the body. And our product, as you'll hear as I describe it, really doesn't change the body, doesn't really cause any interaction with the body. And that's why we're a medical device. So we just started clinical trials. We're really excited. We did one in Australia, one in Canada that were 100% successful. Doctors were able to use our device 100% of the time with their patients. So really, we're really pleased about that. But answering your question of how does it work, have you had your blood drawn recently?
I have.
Great. When you had your blood drawn, they isolated a vein. They probably tapped on it or, poked around. The
Yeah.
same thing, the same principle happens to a man who would go in for a Plan A procedure, not on his arm, but in his scrotum. So the vas deferens, which is what carries sperm through your body, through a man's body, is right below the skin, just like your vein is on your arm. So the doctor actually can isolate the vas deferens without doing anything, just by using his fingers. And then we use what's called a no scalpel vasectomy procedure. So the key thing is no scalpel, no needles, etc. So we have a device like a catheter that goes in and places our polymer. So our polymer is patented, our device is patented, and that polymer is the really special part. So it starts out like a syrup. It's a clear liquid, but like a syrup. But when it goes in your vas deferens, the fluid exchanges with the solvent. So all of a sudden that fluidy, viscous material turns into a hydrogel. Now, hydrogels, you may or may not have heard of them, but you're going to. They're being used all over the body in aneurysm surgery, orthopedic surgery. They're just ubiquitous right now because all the medical community has realized that hydrogels are very biocompatible. So they don't have the rejection that other materials like metal, silicone, rubber, other things that have been tried aren't as compatible with the body. So when the hydrogel forms in your vas deferens, it's very happy, the body's happy. And what it does, the way it acts, is sperm cannot go through it. It has the size of pores in it, just like a sponge. So sperm are too large. They will try to go through, but they just can't. There's no opening big enough. But the good thing is fluid goes through it. So urologist pointed out to me that a lot of men who have vasectomies get a painful syndrome afterwards because of the pressure. Because of vasectomy, they're cutting, cauterizing, or sewing, and so the fluid just doesn't go through. So in this case, your fluid's going through, so the urologist said, aha, I won't have that issue if I use this procedure. We're not vasectomy 2.0. We're really for men who want contraception. And usually that's men 18 to 49. It could be older. I think it will go a lot older than that, but that's the sweet spot that we're talking about. So the
Mm.
hydrogels in your body, there have been studies in India by the early developers that showed 13 years products there, 99% successful at preventing pregnancy, no side effects. And then the great thing is, if you want to reverse it, so say you're in a new relationship and you want to have a child, or the current relationship, whatever the case may be, all we need to do is go in that simple procedure and use a dilute solution of sodium bicarbonate, and that hydrogel dissolves immediately into a water-like fluid, easily removed from the body. So that's kind of
Wow.
what it is and how it works.
That's incredible. So just to share, as I'm an older man now, but I was a younger man when I was younger. And as I described, had a child, decided to adopt a child, which we did. But I had a vasectomy. And it terrified me to even contemplate it, as I know I've talked to many, many men since. I'm sure you have as well. And, understandably, you know, we all, have fears of, being cut and cut there, having any even attention down there at any age, man. I know for me it was terrifying, number one. Number two, I mean, the procedure was, it was uh, a, a major minor procedure, but it was major for me.
Yeah,
And some of the consequence of what you described was true. It was successful, didn't have children, but there were some of those complications.
yeah,
And finally, this was as a young man, I left the relationship and many years later. In my case, the woman that I met already had children. We didn't want more children, but I know as many men, if I had the option you're describing at the beginning, and I'm going to ask you another question from a man's point of view. You've talked to men. Um, but if I'd have had that option available, I would have, just jumped at it, as would my wife, who was saying, why is it me that we're talking about having a tubal or, a more invasive or demanding contraceptive from a woman's point of view?
yep,
So, I mean, this is revolutionary, and I can imagine people who are watching this will be able to say, yeah, when and where and help. I want to find out.
I know.
So, here's just from a man's point of view.
Yep,
Um, if I were a young man back then saying, I want to do this, and I had had the procedure as you described, and you were then interviewing me, what would I have said about, how it felt just to have the procedure? You
no,
know,
that's
minor things are often minor to somebody that doesn't have them to you. But what are you hearing from the guys
yep.
in the studies that have actually had it and they report what?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that, because an important point that I didn't mention is, unlike a vasectomy, to insert Plan A into the vas deferens is very simple. You just squirt it in and it's done. It closes. The hole is so tiny it closes. And remember, I also didn't mention that you have a topical anesthetic. So unlike when you had your blood drawn, imagine if you had a topical anesthetic. Not, I mean, it could be painless anyways, but imagine, you have a topical anesthetic, a couple minute procedure. And, for vasectomy, you're cutting, you're cauterizing, you got to smell that terrible odor, or they're sewing, the vas deferens, and they're putting it back in, they're checking for bleeders. That's a lot more invasive. So what the doctors notice right away is this is quicker, less invasive, less tissue damage, less potential for side effects than a vasectomy.
And
So
what would the guys just give me a few words? The guy c comes out of this and he's asked, so how was it? Was it easy? How long did it take? What are some of the things the guys actually say?
yeah, the men would say, I didn't even realize it was over already. It was so quick, it was so painless.
Mm,
They can get right back to work because we're not doing a lot of, like I said, cutting, sewing, pulling.
mm,
It's just a simple insertion. Once they find the vas deferens, insert our hydrogel, and you're done. And like we like
mm.
to say, set it and forget it. And that's the difference between, we're called a vas occlusive, so vas deferens, and we occlude it. So we prevent sperm from flowing through. Um, it's a great option that men don't have to think every day about taking a pill, using a cream, whatever the case may be. And it's not systemic. So anything you take orally goes through your whole body. This is something we're putting right exactly where the sperm are. So we're really, very focused on a very safe, effective procedure. And like you said, men, it's so simple compared to a vasectomy that, the doctor recognizes it right away.
So I think the question I'm sure you've been asked before is why has it taken so long to get to this point? I mean, what you're describing
Mhm.
seems obvious, and as a scientist, I'm sure there are reasons why it's taken so long. But for the average person, male or female, that's saying, I want to hear, and we'll talk about, where you are with the trials, what it looks like for the future, but.
Yeah.
Why has it taken so long to get to this point?
The answer you probably have heard before, medical innovations take a long time. The recent example that I learned about was GLP-1s. Those came on the market and you probably imagine maybe 5 years of research, 10. Those are over 30 years of research before we see them on the market. So like that, the early research was done in India. They didn't really have the science that we have today to understand the mechanism, to understand how to make it successfully in a way that's very pure and non-affecting to the body. But they did some great research. They did clinical studies on men. That's how we know that it lasts over 10 years, but they never commercialized it. There was a nonprofit foundation who deserves tremendous credit, the Parsimas Foundation in San Francisco. They had licensed that technology and they had perfected it. And we licensed it from them about 3 years ago. So we have a worldwide exclusive license. So we're really focused on getting the clinical trials for the US and then globally, and then also to commercialize. So we're ramping up production of both the hydrogel polymer as well as the medical device because we want to be on the market as quick as possible.
So I think again, the next obvious question is when, and I can imagine, as we're talking, I'm saying the same thing. I have children and grandchildren and I've worked with thousands of men and their families and women watch the podcast as well and read about the articles, and so. If I were watching this now and saying what I expect many are saying, when will it be available for the average person to
Yeah.
be able to apply or to come to a clinic and be able to get the value that we know is inherent in what you're describing?
And we feel the urgency. We get every day men coming to our website wanting to be in clinical trials, asking the same question that you are. When will this be on the market? So we had a great meeting with the FDA last year and we laid out our clinical program for a medical device. So right now we're just starting what's called early feasibility trials. So we're just gauging the safety and efficacy. And like I said, the device already over 100% successful. We then go into what's called feasibility trials later this year, and then next year is a pivotal trial. And then we should be on the market probably early to mid 2027. So not that long,
That's soon.
but every day
Yeah.
we want to move faster and faster.
Uh,
It's exciting,
And we wanted to obviously anything that is medically
right?
viable and legal, takes time, but the time you're describing compared to, both the need and the value, that's very hopeful as a
Mhm.
professional that's, looking towards these kind of things. So Um, I'd like to step back a little bit now, that so those of us that are waiting, it's not going to be tomorrow, it's not going to be the next day, but soon in the next few years. So talk to me a little more about the company that you're part of. And at one point it said jumped on board. You'd had a lot of background in many different related fields and both with various companies. And I read your resume, it's impressive.
Thank
And just talk a little
you.
bit about, I'd be interested in kind of the personal side of
Yeah,
what in you said. I'm sure you had a lot of other things you were doing, other
right.
things you could have done at the next step of your career. Why did you decide this one? And talk a little bit more about the company and why this particular company is the one that you wanted to be part of.
Yeah, no, thank you for asking that question. You know, in my career, as you said, I've had a lot of successes. I've been blessed by a lot of very interesting products. But when I saw this Plan A and the other products, I'm going to talk to you about one other one. I just had to come on board because to me, the greatest thing I could do is use all my experience to help get something to market that really benefits society. And that's really, in my experience, that's very unusual that you're really impacting society, that you're making a big change because those unplanned pregnancies, the 50% that I commented earlier, those lead to poverty directly. That's one of the most direct links to poverty is unplanned pregnancies. It leads to mental illness. It leads to physical illness for both the mother and the child. It adds stress to relationships that sometimes is unbearable. So there's so much that this product can do for the world. And we really see it as a global product. We have visions of, mobile units going out in places that don't have hospitals or doctor's offices. We don't need a hospital. Our product can be used in a medical office, but it could be used in a mobile unit. The thing that really, gratified me is I met a group of doctors who go around the world training doctors on vasectomies to try to keep the population growth in third world countries low. Right away, they said, we want to adopt this. When this is available, we're going to use your product instead because it's quicker, less invasive. And if someone wants it reversed, it's very easy to do. But your question about what Next Life Sciences is all about,
Yeah.
as I mentioned, our founder incubates companies like this. So he likes to be in highly regulated areas. He has another company in the defense area. He has his own foundation for gifted orphans. And then Next Life Sciences is the life science company. And we're focused, as I said early on reproductive health. The other product that we call our portfolio product, Plan A is our flagship product, but we do have another product that we're developing almost on the same timeline. And it's for the 40% of men who can't take the current products for erectile dysfunction. They have a medical issue, usually it's heart disease, and their doctor says it's not worth your life. So we developed a topical product. So it could be used as a cream topically applied to the penis before sexual activity. Right now, those men, their only option is a painful injection directly in the penis, which as a woman makes me cringe. I'm sure a lot of men are cringing right now just hearing me talk about this. So we feel this is a large unmet need that we have the technology. I mentioned I ran a drug development company. We did all the topical drug development. So we have all the technology to know how to make drugs that are effective go through the skin. And again, it's that same story. You don't want to take a systemic drug that goes all over your body, vasodilating. That's why men get headaches, flushing, different side effects, let alone if they have heart disease. It could be very dangerous, life-threatening. So that's another product we're very excited about getting that one to the market as well.
That's another one I've, had some experience with, men that I work with. I work with a whole range of men over the years at my clinic and my practice. My PhD is in international health. I was in medical school early on in my career, found that medicine at the time I was in medical school was really too restrictive and in some way elitist, to be honest, that focused on, either you had to have a lot of money to get the kind of care that was good, or it was very narrow in focus on usually what could make money or what, invasive surgeries or pharmaceuticals would be. And I'm not saying there aren't really good ones because there certainly are in many areas, but I found I left, went into first social work and then went back and got a PhD in international health, and am just excited not only for the specific products that you're talking about, but the concepts that sound like are behind and infused in your company that looks at maybe healthcare from a broader perspective, a more universal perspective, one that's more preventive rather than invasive in, many different ways,
Mhm.
and ones that bring people together,
Yes.
rather
Yeah.
than
Right.
separate people or, separate systems. I can't imagine, as you described, that there's not a whole lot of women that are saying yes, and a whole lot of men that are saying yes, and a whole lot of medical people who are on the front lines that have been saying, this is the kind of medicine I went to medical school
Right.
to be part of, or I went to, you know, PhD or the various nursing school or all the different specialties. This is the kind of medicine I want to do. So I guess I just want to acknowledge what you're doing and um,
Thank
talk
you.
about what are the ways that at this time people can learn more
Yeah.
about both
Mhm.
you, your company, what has been done and what you're planning, and some
Yeah.
of the, stay in touch to hear how this progresses.
Yeah, no, great idea. We have a website, Plan A for Men, kind of simple, or our company, nextlifesciences.org. We like to keep our, interested followers very well informed. We usually do a quarterly newsletter. We're about ready for one now. So we talk about our clinical research, our fundraising, all the different things a startup company does. We talk about our great team. I have to acknowledge that I have a really powerful team. We all have over 30 years experience in areas like medical device, men's health, um, just, a plethora of experience that really helps us really take something as valuable as these products and get them to market. So we've done that many times before. But no, we'd love to hear from people. We have, like I said, we have 50,000 men signed up already for the product or the clinical trials. So, we're really anxious to get them involved. And that's been the really, rewarding part is talking to men who really want to participate. There's a real need for this product, like you said. Why hasn't it happened sooner? I think that need has been building and, having an outlet like Plan A will be, very well received.
Well, I can tell you just from my experience, over the years working in I describe gender medicine and men's health. And yeah, when the field of gender specific medicine was formed, I have a colleague, Marianne Legato, who's an MD, was a cardiologist originally. And what she found was uh, that the focus on heart disease tended to be looking at symptoms the way males
Yeah.
tended to see heart attacks, because men were the ones that were getting,
Mhm.
heart attacks at higher rates early on than women were. And what she found in her studies was that when they actually started looking at symptoms for women, many women were getting turned away, saying you don't have the pain going down your arm, you don't have the classical symptoms of what heart attack was seen at the time. And so many women were getting turned away and were ending up having heart attacks because they didn't recognize the symptoms that were more specific to women. And then she found, this is now about 30 years ago or more, this Foundation for Gender Specific Medicine. And what she found when she started out was the focus was more on women, that the field was in a sense ready at the time to embrace that women needed, some specific care that was unique to women. And she acknowledged that the males needed just as much, that the idea that medicine that
Mhm.
wasn't specific to women was everything else must be just specific to men. But in fact, we know it wasn't,
Right.
that we
Yeah.
didn't do studies that actually looked at gender specific issues. And that now I think what you're saying that feels so exciting to me is that now we're seem to be at a new era where in addition to specific things for women, like learning the symptoms that may be
Right.
more common in women for heart attack, now we're looking at things like you're describing, as well as male depression, which again, often we neglected depression in male and suicide because the symptoms for depression were more common and more accepted in the way women experience depression. So this feels to me like a whole new area that is finally emerging that I really applaud and definitely want to be
Yeah.
connected and hear more as this develops and help spread the word because I have as we
Mhm.
talked, a following and I'll be able to share this through article and maybe a number of articles and let our community know what you're doing so we can be part of it and participate with you.
No, that's awesome. And Jed, I love that you use the women heart disease example. I use that all the time because right now men don't really get a conversation with their family doctor when they're young. You know, what birth control are you using? Men tell me I never hear that, but women always do. We, at a young age, start going to a gynecologist and start talking about birth control. So just the way that women's heart disease was never really examined or talked about, as you said, I think very strongly that the dynamic of discussion with men about contraception is going to change at a hopefully very early stage in their interactions with doctors. That's the other thing. Urologists usually see men much older, where women go to a gynecologist in our teens and then every year. Men usually don't go till they have a prostate issue or maybe want a vasectomy, so much older. So all of a sudden, it's going to be these 18 to 49-year-olds, going to the urologist. Family practitioners will also, we believe, start doing the Plan A procedure.
Well, there's kind of a joke in the men's health field that, women go to a gynecologist, that men need a gynecologist that specializes in men's health and a urologist. And actually, my urologist is a woman, that she specializes in urology, sees men and women. But we need, my image, and this may be part of the future now coming into reality, is I envisioned that men and women would often come together, particularly when you're going to talk about some of the issues you're describing, birth control, and would go into a clinic and we would have the women could be seen by, the woman's specialist and men could be seen by the men's specialist. And then you'd come back together and you'd be able to see, okay, what are different that the men need to be doing and the women, but that brings us together because these are decisions of health at all levels, from babyhood, to, old age, that are affecting our whole family. And we need to be having these kinds of discussions and
Absolutely.
practitioners that really are looking at the whole person, all the
Yep.
different parts of us, not the specialized, just the below the belt kind of issues, and sees the whole person, and also where we can be, working together, men and women, and being able to have clinics like you're describing. So this is very exciting. I really want to stay a part of this, and hopefully maybe we can do, another interview down the road where we can get an update on where things are going and hear more from some of the rest of your team at some point to hear what else you're doing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we're so aligned when you talk about the same way we're looking at a continuum of a person's whole life. We're not just looking at childbearing, we're looking at sexual function as well. So couples, as you said, can come together. That's our
Well,
task.
super. Is there anything else you'd like us to, be sure it gets included in this? As I told you, we will be doing an article so that we'll have the details and the website and where people can go. But anything else you would like the audience, because these podcasts live in various places, as everybody knows who has any connection on the internet. They have a life of their own. So these will
No,
be get turned into YouTube videos that will be part of the article, but
yeah.
they also ha live on my,
Mhm.
YouTube channel. And then because of the web, they get sent viral and then they end up, you never know who sees it when and where. So anything else you'd like to put out while I have you at this
No,
juncture in our podcast coming to a
oh,
close?
yeah, thank you, Judd. No, I just want, I love the way you embrace this whole area, and I believe people, men and women, both young and old, will do the same thing. You know, Plan A is a phenomenal product that's going to open so many doors for couples, for men. It's reversible on demand, it's non-hormonal, long lasting. So all those attributes are going to really change the way society looks at contraception. So we're really creating, a whole different mindset. And, we love, when people write to us through our website, they can write to me individually. We are raising, funds as most startups are right now. So if there's any investors in the audience, we'd love to hear from you too. We have some wonderful investors already. Our investors, they're focused on life sciences, but they're also impact investors. So they really are looking for something that's going to change society. So we're very much aligned with them. So we're really fortunate to have, a really good group of investors behind us because you need money to do the clinical trials.
Exactly, exactly. Well, super. Well, hang on. I'm gonna kind of bring the interview to a close, and then we can chat a little bit before we go offline. So hang on for a minute now.